7 party leaders, but no clear winner after last night's election debate. The morning after the night before, the politicians have been out and about. We'll be hearing what the voters thought of last night's performances. Well, hello, very good afternoon. Parties left, right and centre literally are claiming victory in the aftermath of last night's television election debate between 7 leaders. The Conservatives said David Cameron had emerged clearly ahead as the best person to lead the UK, but Labour said Ed Miliband had staked out an alternative vision. Well, 7 million people watched the 2-hour debate on ITV, and the party leaders have spent the morning out on the campaign trail, as our political correspondent Chris Mason reports.
The election campaign trail is not all about the glamour of the bright lights of a TV studio. It's also about making the most of the view on the grey, wet morning after. For the Liberal Democrat leader Nick Clegg, it was a poster launch in a pub car park near Stockport. So what was his verdict on last night?
I'm not going to start sort of holding up scorecards, marks out of 10, but I certainly hope on my part that I was able to get the message across for the Liberal Democrats.
The Prime Minister, meanwhile, toured a new housing development in Chorley in Lancashire and admitted meeting little ones made him broody. But whilst he ruled out any new additions to the Cameron family, Conservatives are not ruling out some sort of deal with UKIP after the election. Instead, he said,
to me, the real abiding impression was that I have a long-term plan that's working, that's delivering the jobs and the homes and the livelihoods that we need, and that's what you get on the one hand, the competence of a plan. To me, the rest of it was a sort of coalition of chaos.
Labour activists in Blackpool were clearly pleased to see their leader this morning. Party strategists appear content, if not ecstatic, with Ed Miliband's performance last night.
I think what I set out was the clear choice between a Labour government and a Conservative government, and I was pleased that we were able to do that last night. And I think what David Cameron tried and failed to do was to defend an economy that isn't working for most working people, an NHS that is failing people.
UKIP has been defending Nigel Farage this morning after this remark in the debate.
There are 7,000 diagnoses in this country every year for people who are HIV positive, which is not a good place for any of them to be, I know. But 60% of them are not British nationals.
It's dangerous, it divides communities and it creates stigma to people who are ill, and I think you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Well, I'm sorry, we've got to put our own people first.
The SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon isn't even running for a Westminster seat, but she does run Scotland. Her message, though, was pitched at a wider audience.
That your access to education as a young person should be based entirely on your ability to learn and never ever on your ability to pay.
The inevitable, if slightly ridiculous question asked after debates like last night is, well, who won? Well, the opinion polls, for what they're worth, suggest there isn't a clear answer to that. But what was very clear for anyone watching is just how much more complicated politics has become, and that isn't likely to change. And as if to prove it, what was the headline from last night? No one can quite agree. Chris Mason, BBC News.
Well, so the morning after the night before, what is the verdict of the voters on last night's performances? Our correspondent Sarah Campbell has been finding out.
It was a chance for the politicians to set out their stalls, but how did it go down with voters?
The whole debate itself I found really interesting, especially with Ed Miliband. He kept looking directly down to camera each time and turning and addressing the people at home. So it felt like the whole thing was a political debate.
Do you think it's worthwhile? Do you think you learned something from them?
Well, yes, you do, but it was very, very limited the time they were getting last night, wasn't it? You know, between 7 of them, yeah. There's 7 of them there, and you know they couldn't talk much because they were only on the hour for 1 hour.
So do you think it's worth doing?
No, I don't really.
For others, it does seem to have spiced up the campaign in a way perhaps they didn't expect.
Well, I thought the Scottish lady came out well. I thought she kept to the subject more than some of the others.
Yeah, I must admit. I suppose maybe is it because we're women as well, and actually listening to a woman actually speaking and being quite confident the way that she sort of spoke and came across.
That is a point. 3 of the people on the platform were women.
Yeah.
Was that positive?
yes.
Yes.
Do you think, I mean, politicians have been getting quite obsessed about these TV debates. Do you think the public are as obsessed as they are?
I don't think the general public are. I think they're trying to make it more like America, where it becomes a personality contest.
I know your daughter's 15. Were you tempted to watch at all?
Not very much, no.
I know you can't vote, so it wouldn't make a difference, but no interest at all in seeing what they've got to say on television?
I think it's quite confusing to watch sometimes.
For the millions who did tune in, last night was a flavour of what voters can expect in the run-up to polling day. Sarah Campbell, BBC News, Covent Garden.
Well, a wide range of reactions from voters there. And in a moment, we'll get the view from Downing Street with our political correspondent, Ellie Price. But first to Kevin Keane, who's in the SNP Heartland of North East Scotland. And Kevin, how is Nicola Sturgeon's performance specifically? We saw a couple of women talking to Sarah there about her being positive and natural. How is it going down there?
Well, the SNP, the Scottish National Party, says that she's gone down very well and that the party membership increased by about 1,800 members during the course of the 2-hour debate and in the hours that followed it. Many people south of the border, also on social media in particular, saying that she is the right person and has been the right person to fill that kind of centre-left ground that many say Ed Miliband has moved away from. That, of course, is a convenient narrative for the Conservative Party because politics on this side of the border is very different to politics on the wider UK level because, of course, the Conservatives here in this current Parliament have been the fourth party with just one MP. That old joke about there being more pandas in Scotland than Conservative MPs. So the only way that the Conservative Party could have any impact on the overall tally of MPs north of the border is if those Labour seats were to fall to the Scottish National Party. They, of course, Nicola Sturgeon talking very strongly yesterday in that debate about being able to have an influence in any kind of minority Labour government. That, of course, is a long way from happening. It is up to what the voters decide.
And Ellie, how's it been seen there in Westminster?
Well, Ed Miliband and David Cameron were both keen to show that, or to point out that it would only be one of the two of them walking through that door after the election. And both, I think, will be happy with their performances. They both got their messages across and neither made a significant gaffe. But to get through that door after the election, all the indicators suggest that we're hurtling towards a hung parliament, so they may just need the assistance of some of those smaller parties that they shared a platform with last night. We're starting to get a sense of how that might look. So while Labour and the SNP have ruled out any formal coalition, we saw Nicola Sturgeon last night handing out a covert olive branch. He said, "I back Ed" on the issue of raising the top rate of tax. Similarly, senior Tories since the debate have failed to actively rule out doing any kind of deal with UKIP. I think if David Cameron and indeed Ed Miliband were keen to show last night that with the debate that a government made up of all these small parties would be chaotic and unruly, they'll be disappointed. Nigel Farage and Nicola Sturgeon were deemed to have done very well. So even if these debates don't necessarily determine the outcome of the election, they may just show that British politics and its two-party ways is over.
Ellie and Kevin in Aberdeen, thank you very much, both of you.